Good evening. My name is Andrea Watson, and I'm Tualatin Valley Water District's Communications and Public Affairs Supervisor. I want to welcome and thank you for attending tonight's Talking Water. We are so pleased that you took time out of your evening to join us to learn more about your water rates. In the past, we have hosted these events in person as open houses, and we miss those opportunities to talk to you face to face and enjoy a richer exchange of information. We recognize these virtual meetings have their limits, but we do appreciate you taking time, and we wanted to encourage you to participate fully this evening as much as the platform will allow. Today, we're going to be discussing the water rate changes. Many of our customers are billed jointly with Clean Water Services, who provide storm and wastewater management services. They are a separate agency who sets their rates independently for those services. This evening, we're going to be able to talk about the Tualatin Valley Water, which provides your drinking water and water for fire protection services, and the rate proposal for those charges. Next slide, please. Before we get started with the presentation portion of the evening, we'd just like to let you know how this platform works. We are a public agency, and your questions and comments become part of the public record. These sessions are recorded for replay for customers who aren't able to attend the live event. At the end, after the three presenters are finished with their information portions, there will be a question and answer period. There is a lot of information shared, so you are encouraged to put your questions in as they occur to you. There's a little bar there that we took a snapshot of, and the place where you type in your questions is the one that looks like a cartoon thought bubble with a question mark in the middle. You submit your questions at any time, and we have staff who are moderating those and will publish them as soon as they find a subject matter expert on the call who will answer your question at the end. It can take a couple minutes for that process to occur, so we just ask for you to be patient after you submit it, and to let you know that we will stay on the call as long as we get questions. So if we finish early, that's great, but if we run over, that's also great. We'll stick on the call with you until you got all your questions answered. We also just want to remind our guests and this evening that we are an inclusive and discrimination-free organization. And so anything that you would publish in that chat, we ask that you keep it free of any kind of personal attacks or any kind of profanity or anything like that, which would prevent us from publishing it to the whole group. So with that, I'd like to see the next slide, please. Also, just as a reminder, we are doing 3 of these sessions. This is the session number 2, so there's 1 left, and they are all the same in content. So you're welcome to join us on Saturday, August 21st for the 3rd session, but the content will be the same. So this evening we have 3 presenters. We have our Chief Executive Officer, Tom Hickmann. We have Dave Kraska, who is the Willamette Water Supply Program Director. And then Paul Matthews, our Chief Financial Officer, will conclude the presenter portion, and then we will turn it over to Q&A. So again, I want to thank you for joining us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Andrea. So I want to explain my role. I work directly for the board of directors, and I'm happy to say that tonight we have 2 of our board members in attendance. Commissioner Doan and Commissioner Duggan are both in attendance tonight to hear any comments you may have, as well as any of our responses. Today's event is really focused on rate information and the proposed rate increases, and why are we doing them. So the entire presentation is focused in that way. The Board of Commissioners will be collecting input in advance of adopting water rates in the next 2 weeks, and these rates are for the next 2 years. The water rates you pay can only be used to fund the operation, management, maintenance, and construction of your water system. Our funding comes only from rates, so we receive no funding from any taxes. To help you understand the purpose of the proposed rate increases, I have joining me tonight Paul Matthews, our Chief Financial Officer, and Dave Kraska, our Willamette Water Supply Director. And they will both be sharing with you about information that what's driving our rates and our financial challenges and what we're doing to address those. So one of the things that we are all working to do is keep these as low as possible and as predictable as possible. And you're going to hear more about that in just a moment. So, you know, ultimately, my job is ultimately to make sure that you have clean, reliable water no matter what. And we do have risks that threaten our water supply. Though one of the ones that you're probably very well aware of is the Cascadia subduction event. And some of the major investments we're making right now addresses this risk. In addition to that risk, we also face droughts potentially on a more frequent basis as a result of climate change. And we're going to be laying out how we are trying to protect against that as well. We also face challenges with power outages due to storms and fires that threaten our water supply. And one of the things that we do is have multiple water supply to address that. One thing I'd like to point out is we deliver this water to your home or business at a price of 1.2 cents per gallon, which is really a phenomenal rate to receive any kind of natural resource delivered to you on a 24/7 on-demand basis for that low of a cost. What are our sources? Well, one you're going to hear a great deal about tonight is our source from the Willamette River Water Supply Project. That one is a major investment that we're going through right now, and really adds a seismically robust system and source that we can draw on in the future. That won't be operational till 2026. This project, and you're going to hear more about this, was actually started in the 1970s when the district acquired rights. Since then, the district took a number of actions to get to the point that we began really the design and construction phase in 2015, but a number of studies were completed before that to show that this was the most economic way of proceeding for making a more reliable water supply for the future. We also have reservoirs throughout the system. These reservoirs are really used to help us during those very peak demand periods and help us have emergency backup supply as well. We also have aquifer storage and recovery, where during high flow times and wetter conditions, we take water and we put it into the ground, and we pull that back out of the ground when there's less water supply available. And then we rely heavily on regional partnerships with the Joint Water Commission and the Portland Water Bureau to get our current water supplies, but we will continue to rely on those sources to some extent in the future. And then, of course, water conservation plays a critical role in expanding and prolonging our current resource. And so we point to water conservation as another supply that we have and we promote. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. I think there we are. Okay. So how is your money used when you pay your bills? What do we do with it? So one of the things that we are doing currently is the construction of the additional water supply. It is driving everything right now, and you'll see and hear more about that here momentarily. But that's not the only thing. We have repairs and replacements of aging infrastructure in the system. This work has to be done, and in order to continue to have a reliable supply. So that's another thing we use the money for. And then lastly is to purchase water through the Joint Water Commission and the Portland Water Bureau is the other big area of spend and what we do with your money. But we take this all very seriously, and if you could go to the next slide, I'd like to explain a little bit about some of the challenges. This is a big picture perspective, and you're going to hear more from Paul Matthews about this later on in this presentation. But what you see here on the left-hand side of this graph, this very large blue peak, is really the bulk of spending that we're going to be doing over the next couple of years that's directly tied to the Willamette Water Supply Project. This really it's our financial pinch point. And as you can see, as we get further out to 2026 and 2027, of course, that drops way off. And that puts us in a bit of a financial pinch currently. So this is the challenge we have currently, and the actions you're going to hear about tonight, including the rate increases, is to address this peak and the associated risks with taking this spending peak on. Please go to the next slide. So we've taken actions to manage costs, working with the team here. I asked everybody on the team to look for how we could save money, where could we make cuts. We did reduce our personal services by about 2.8%. I like to point out that we are a lean organization, and we don't have a lot of extra staff capacity. So these kind of cuts and delays in hiring, we certainly feel. And it certainly puts us in a situation that we might be a little bit leaner than we want to be, but again, we understand we got to do this in order to keep the rates in a more sustainable and predictable pattern. The other thing that we did, which was very difficult, was making decisions about deferring very large capital projects. So we deferred $50 million in infrastructure projects. This was undertaken by not just Tualatin Valley Water District, but also by our partner agencies, Hillsborough and Beaverton, where we all agreed that we needed to find ways to try to lessen the rate impacts during these economic challenging period that we're in. Then the other thing we've done is we've partnered with other utilities to lower and spread costs out over a larger population, and this really does help us keep our rates down and our future costs down as well. So that's what we've done to manage costs, but you're going to hear a whole bunch more on this from Dave Kraska and what his project team has done. I like to point out one of the most amazing things about the work that Dave's team has done is since the very early predictions of the cost of that project, it hasn't changed a whole lot, and that's quite unusual for a project of this size, that the early estimates have really stayed pretty close to the same as we are approaching construction, which is a truly amazing feat by the team. Go to the next slide, please. So what's our strategy here ultimately for dealing with this? Well, the thing that we laid out for our board was we laid out the risks that we face. And one of the things that we realized as we were putting this budget together was that there was significant risk for future rate increases that could be higher than what was planned if we didn't take some aggressive actions now. So we made that clear, and our board has responded appropriately. We also have concern about the economy, and one of the things over the last 2 years that we've seen is a decline in revenue from water sales. While this summer We are now seeing, that revenue come back more into line with our projections. The prior 2 years were very rough and created a significant hole in our budget that you'll hear more from Paul Matthews later on. And then we have significant construction risks. These risks are hard to address because this is the stuff we don't have a lot of control over. You all have probably experienced this on some level if you've purchased anything in terms of anything made with wood, concrete, steel, plastic. All those costs have gone up significantly, and we do a lot of adjustments to try to accommodate those increases, but those things we can't always do, and so it poses a risk. So our strategy to address this is to build financial capacity. And we do this through adopting rates that provide financial resources in advance. And that is largely what we're doing. And that is what we're proposing. We took some steps, or the board took some steps that is remarkable in that they recognize that this has been a big lift. This is hard on everybody. And they increased the Customer Emergency Assistance Program to help those that are in a different economic rung and an economic situation personally. We've now got additional capacity to help those customers. And then the other thing that we are doing, and this is becoming now a daily call with recent news, but we're pursuing federal and state assistance. So we are looking everywhere to find additional dollars that we can get, whether that be through low interest loans or through grants, to help us with what we want to accomplish here over the next several years. So we continue to pursue those and use those tools to help keep rates down. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dave Kraska and let him explain to you what we're doing with the project.
All right, thank you, Tom. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dave Kraska. I work for TVWD as the director of the Willamette Water Supply Program. Let's go to the next slide. I've got 4 parts to my presentation tonight. First, I want to talk a little bit about TVWD's history in terms of its evaluation and identification of long-term water supplies. Then I'll give you an overview of the Willamette Water Supply Program, tell you basically what it is. Then we'll talk about the WWSP Willamette Water Supply Program delivery progress, what we've gotten accomplished since it started, and then looking ahead, what do we plan to do for the next fiscal year and the years thereafter. Next slide. So regarding TVWD's long-term water supply selection, it actually begins back in the 1970s when TVWD at that time acquired water rights to the Willamette River. And since doing that, TVWD periodically evaluated its water supply options, and really that picked up steam in the early 2000s. And TVWD commissioned a detailed study starting in 2011, so 10 years ago, that concluded in 2013, where the board selected the Willamette River after a multi-year technical study with public input. And that study included the 4 options that are shown here on the right-hand side of this graphic. Starting from the top and going clockwise, the first was groundwater wells to the north, developing a new supply there. Purchasing additional water going forward from the city of Portland to the east. Constructing the mid-Willamette River supply, or increasing storage at Hag Lake and basically increasing the supply from the existing Joint Water Commission. Ultimately, through this study and with the public input, the district selected the mid-Willamette River supply. For these notes captured here on the left, it was the lowest cost alternative. So with that, it has less impact on rates. It provides excellent water quality as proven through almost 20 years of operational experience for the city of Wilsonville and also for the city of Sherwood that receive supplies from the Willamette River. It provides an ownership opportunity of the water supply for TVWD, which it currently does not enjoy with the city of Portland. It's a reliable supply, and of these options that were considered, it has fewer environmental impacts upon implementation. So with that, the Mid-Willamette supply, or the Willamette River supply, was selected as the long-term water supply source for TVWD. Next slide, please. So with that, we had to define the Willamette Water Supply Program, and this is these next slides provide an overview of what that program is. And it starts with creation of our mission statement. Next slide, please. And the mission, so the mission statement basically guides everything we do in the program. Let me read it out loud here for everyone. It is to provide a cost-effective, reliable, and resilient supply system by July 2026 that benefits current and future generations of the communities we serve and supports a vibrant local economy. And so that mission statement really guides everything that we've done on the program and all of our planning. As you see right there, it has a target end date of July 2026. So all of our scheduling is to achieve that date successfully. Along the bottom of the slide, you'll see the TVWD is not alone in this effort. It is the managing partner in the Willamette Water Supply Program, but the cities of Hillsborough and Beaverton are also partners in the program and sharing the costs of getting it completed. Next slide. So that's the definition of the program. There's a new abbreviation here now, WWSS. That's the Willamette Water Supply System. So the program that I'm running is to create and build the system, the Willamette Water Supply System. Here's a really high-level overview of it. It starts at the Willamette River with an existing intake located in Wilsonville that we are expanding and improving the seismic capacity of. We are also constructing a new state-of-the-art water treatment plant in the eastern side of the city of Sherwood. We'll be building more than 30 miles of large diameter water transmission main and water storage tanks up on Cooper Mountain. And so the graphic on the right here shows you in very schematic form what the whole Willamette Water Supply System looks like. Next slide. So these next few slides give you kind of a more of a visual image of what each of those elements look like. This is an aerial photo of the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant down in Wilsonville on the bank of the Willamette River that you see in the background there in this graphic, or this figure. So go to the next, oh no, click one more time, and then you'll see the flag there that captures where the raw water intake currently resides there at the water treatment plant. The next slide shows an aerial overview of the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant, and right next to it there is the treatment plant park. It's a really nice park there in Wilsonville. And go ahead and click one more time. And so the dashed line there highlights that square building on the bank, which is the raw water pump station. Below the raw water pump station, there's a pipe that extends through the bank out into the Willamette River, and then there's fish screens submerged in the Willamette River, which is where we draw our source. Just to avoid any confusion, this aerial photo also captures above the water treatment plant there what looks like a construction zone, but it's actually the operations area for Wilsonville Concrete Products right next to the water treatment plant there. Next slide. So that's the intake facilities. Now that's going to bring the water out of the Willamette River. Then we need to get the water to the water treatment plant that we would be constructing in Sherwood, like I mentioned. There's a lot going on in this graphic, so let me explain. On the left-hand side is a photo of the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant. As I mentioned, that's been in operation for about 20 years now, and the operational experience has been outstanding. It's produced excellent quality water with no water quality upsets in those 20 years of operations. So there's a lot to be learned from that and a lot to be copied. We don't need to reinvent the wheel there, but there's been a lot of technological advances in those 20 years, and we will be incorporating those in our water treatment plant. Our water treatment plant is shown in an engineering drawing in the upper right of this graphic. And so that's the facility that we're going to be building in Sherwood. You can barely make it out there, but on the right edge of that graphic is Southwest 124th Avenue, the new road Washington County constructed. And that's where our treatment plant is going to be located. There's a box below the water treatment plant graphic there that highlights what we mean when we say a multi-barrier water treatment plant. On the left-hand column there, we talk about constituents in the raw water. Those constituents could be turbidity, such as physical constituents or particles, could be pathogens, taste and odors, trace organics, or emerging contaminants. Those are all the things that we want to remove from the water. Across the top of this chart, we have the various processes that we'll be implementing at our brand new state-of-the-art water treatment plant, including ballasted flocculation, intermediate ozonation, GAC filtration, UV disinfection, and chlorine disinfection. And what you'll see from this graphic is across each of the rows, for each of the constituents in the raw water, there's multiple barriers for removing those constituents from the water before it's distributed into our finished water transmission mains. That's what we mean by a multi-barrier treatment process, and it's the highest level of protection for public health for the water that we'll be producing from this facility. Next slide. And to connecting all of this and up to the distribution systems will be more than 30 miles of large diameter transmission mains. This is welded steel pipe. This is actually from one of our construction projects all the way back in 2016 that we constructed in the city of Wilsonville. This was actually a partnership project with the city of Wilsonville with a new road that they were constructing there. Next slide. Then one more photo here to show you of I mentioned reservoirs on the top of Cooper Mountain. They'll look something like this. These are actually the reservoirs for the Joint Water Commission system. These are two 20 million gallon concrete storage tanks. Ours would be 15 million gallons, so a little bit smaller than this. Additionally, as I'll explain later in my presentation, we will only be building one of the two reservoirs to, again, conserve costs, but I'll get into that a little bit later in my presentation. Next slide. So we've been in operation since 2015 as far as the Willamette Water Supply Program. That's when we first got started. So we've been operating the program for about 6 years. All told, we've incurred costs of about $300 million. And so a lot has been accomplished in this first 6 years of operations. And these next slides show you what we've done. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of it. Next slide, please. So the progress to date is we've completed 6 pipeline projects. We secured WIFIA loans to help manage the cost of the project, and Chief Financial Officer Paul Matthews will be explaining more about that. We've received our federal permit for constructing the whole system. We've advanced the design of 14 projects, and we're advancing the construction of 7 more projects right now. And we've also continued our successful partnerships, not only with the cities of Beaverton and Hillsborough, but also with other cities and with Washington County. Next slide. So these slides here are going to show you some visual images of some of the construction that we've accomplished. This is showing, again, the raw water pump station right there on the bank of the Willamette River. You see it kind of in the background there. What we've done here is through jet grouting and deep soil mixing is stabilize the bank of the Willamette River. What we found through our engineering analysis and technical studies is that in the event of a major seismic situation, such as the Cascade Subduction Zone event, the bank of the Willamette River is likely to move towards the river, and that would take our raw water facility with it, rendering the water supply inoperable. And so we had to stabilize the bank of the Willamette River, given this is our single point of connection to the river. And so that's what we effected here, and this work is complete. So that improvement is now done. We're now moving on to this facility in terms of seismic stability of the pump station itself, and that work is currently ongoing. Next slide. At another location at the Willamette River Water Treatment Plant, this is what we call our upper site. We've done a lot of grading and foundation work. You see the cranes there in the center of the picture, and that work is where we're going to be installing our electrical facilities, our standby generators, and surge protection equipment, all for the operation of the raw water pump station. Next slide. Given that we're doing this project in Oregon and spanning a lot of distance, there's a lot of creeks and rivers and other wetlands to cross. And sometimes we cross those via trenchless methods. And so this is Paul, go ahead and click and open up all the flags here. So this goes and shows you kind of what that technology was. On the left, we have the sending shaft. On the right, the receiving shaft. Between them, 270 feet of pipe that we have to install. And this was installed using a pipe ramming technology that basically forces the pipe through the ground underneath the creek to the receiving shaft. And the casing that was installed is 84 inches in diameter. Inside that casing goes our 66-inch diameter carrier pipe. And this technology was selected because it was the most economical and environmentally sensitive way to cross this particular creek. Next slide. Very close to that Arrowhead Creek crossing is the Coffee Lake Creek crossing. And this shows the Coffee Lake Creek goes from right to left in this photo here, this aerial. And what this shows is we did an open trench construction through the creek, damming it on either sides. We have a pipeline that carries the water through our trench, and we're installing our pipeline through that. And so in this particular case, through our analysis, this was the most cost-effective and environmentally sensitive way to cross this particular creek. Next slide. But when we're done, after we're done with all this work, this is what it looks like. So wherever we're doing this kind of work, we're always sure to restore the environment to at least as good as, if not better, the condition before we even got there. So it doesn't even look like we were ever there. Next slide. We've done a lot of work in the South Beaverton area, in particular Roy Rogers Road, Sholsbury Road, and this pipeline here going in Tile Flat Road. If you've driven in that area, you've probably seen our construction taking place. Some of the work that's occurred in the work that's occurring in particular on Tile Flat Road and Sholsbury Road, we needed to get it done in advance of the new residential development that's going on in the area. The work on Roy Rogers Road is done in partnership with Washington County. They were expanding Roy Rogers Road. We worked together with them to get our pipeline in at the same time they were expanding the road to save costs and also to reduce impacts on the public. Next slide. And then sometimes we work at night. And so this is a situation where we needed to cross 209th Avenue. And this is a 209th Avenue crossing near Farmington Road. And it was the most efficient way for us to get across this road with the least impact on the public by doing the work at night and closing 209th Avenue for a brief period. We had the approval from Washington County to close this crossing 209th Avenue for the weekend. We started our construction on Friday night. We finished Saturday night, so we're actually able to get out of there a day early. Safest way to do it, most economical way to do it, and again, least impact on the public. Next slide. So that was a brief explanation of a lot of the work that's gone on over the last 6 years. One of the things we like to highlight is a good portion of all of the spend to date has remained what we call local. And what I mean by local, I'll be specific, it's within 50 miles of all the work that we're doing. So when we look in the counties that are within 50 miles, all of the contractors and other folks that have worked on the program to date, 94% of the spend to date has gone to businesses in those locations. Outside of that, we'll also track regional spend. Regional is anything outside of that area, but within Oregon and Washington. And then outside of that area is another 3%. But anyways, I think this is it's really quite impressive that for the type of work that we're doing, the challenges that we're facing, it's done with not only local contractors, but local suppliers as well. Northwest Pipe in North Portland has supplied almost all of the pipe that we've installed to date. Next slide. So looking ahead, next few slides here are to capture what we're doing in the next fiscal year and the years ahead. Next slide, please. So the graph on the right-hand side of the screen here is our Gantt chart. So basically our schedule for the program. We've got every project there on the left-hand side of that chart. We map out exactly when we're going to be either in design or construction or startup or commissioning of all of the different elements of the program. And this highlighted section right there, fiscal 21-22, is the work that we're going to be doing in the next year. And so you can see it kind of swipe down through there, picks up all of the different projects that we're doing. So on the left-hand side here, we're going to be making progress, actually completing the design of 7 remaining projects. We're getting into the really heavy construction part of the program. We're going to be advancing construction on 16 projects. Other program management work is WIFIA compliance and our loan programs, our safety program, communications and outreach program, and development of financial procedures. We're going to be continuing acquisitions, wrapping up our real estate acquisition efforts, permits and land use approvals, and other procurement efforts, and continuing our planning activities, including our water supply integration. We're going to be bringing this new water supply into existing distribution systems. A lot of planning work is underway to make sure that that's done appropriately. As well as commissioning and startup planning and other long-term operations planning. Next slide. So it's critical that as we're doing all of this work, we manage cost. And there's 6 kind of highlights here about how we go about doing that to make sure that we're doing that to the best extent possible. And first, it's maximizing competition. From the very beginning of this program, at every step of the way, we've done our best to maximize competition on every element, whether it's a design element or a planning element or a construction element. to make this as make all of our work as competitive as possible. One of the first places we started doing that is when you look at more than 30 miles of pipeline to construct, we made the decision to not do that as a single massive project, but rather break that up into a series of smaller projects, sized appropriately, that we knew the largest capable local contractors had the bonding capacity in order to complete them, but also make them big enough to make sure that national contractors were interested in competing for the work as well. And so through that, we were able to maximize competition and get the best prices possible to know that we're getting a fair deal on all the work that we send out. And then from that, after we select a contractor or a designer, we negotiate the best price for quality services and goods to make sure, again, that we're getting the best price possible. Along the way, whether it's in design or even in construction, we make cost-effective engineering decisions through constantly challenging ourselves through value engineering exercises. We're also proactively managing the risks on every project, and every team is trying to understand and trying to identify risks that we're currently addressing and risks that will come as the projects progress, and making sure that we're identifying the mitigation techniques that we need to apply to avoid those risks and the responsible parties for doing so. As I mentioned before, partnering in all of the projects, whether it's with our program partners such as Beaverton and Hillsborough, or with other partners like Washington County and the city of Wilsonville and others. And finally, rigorously managing all aspects of the program to stay on schedule. Nothing hurts budget worse than going off schedule on a program as massive as this. And so everything we do is to make sure that we hit critical milestone dates and stay on track, and so far so good. Next slide. So again, partnerships save money and reduce impacts. One more click, please, Paul. And as I've mentioned before, Hillsborough, TVWD, Beaverton, all program partners, all share in the cost of everything that we're doing. And as well, outside of that, we've partnered wherever we can for all the same benefits, such as the Kinsman Road project that we partnered with Wilsonville and ODOT. They were building a road, our pipeline was going to go on that road. We make sure we timed our work with their work to get it done at the same time. Similarly with Washington County, they were building 124th Avenue. We knew we wanted our pipeline along that alignment, so we partnered with them. And then finally in the South Hillsborough area, we partnered with a developer to make sure we got our infrastructure in before they built on top of us. And everywhere we can, we've partnered. It makes it a little bit harder, quite frankly, but in terms of cost savings and reducing public impacts, it is absolutely the right way to go. Next slide. And then finally, I want to tell a little bit of a story about this past year during COVID, as you heard a lot about that from Tom. Each year we go through an annual budget review on the program. We're able to present to our leadership as far as whether we're on track or if there's any deviations and why. And so in December of every year, we prepare a draft of our budget as far as what it looks like for the next year and the years thereafter through the completion of the project. And then we present that to the committees and other leadership. We address comments and so on, and to get to an April board approval of our budget for the next fiscal year. Go ahead and click one more time, please, Paul. And so this year was a little bit more iterative because of the COVID impacts, and also since costs had gone up a little bit on the program. We needed to work really hard to figure out how to address that. How do we get the cost of the program down to as much as we could to reduce the burden on the funding agencies, TVWD, Beaverton, and Hillsborough, to make that as manageable as possible. Colored into this as well is acknowledging that within the next year, all design will be done. Everything will be in construction. So this year was really our last opportunity to make any significant changes in the program and save the cost. But again, substantial risk of escalation remains. So again, it just really emphasizes the need to stay on track, keep on schedule. Next slide. So what we did in terms of managing schedule, risk, and budget this year, that circulative part of the iterative part of the that flow chart is, go ahead and open it up there, Paul. Thank you. Is we developed options for our leadership to consider reducing the spend on the program, the total spend through 2026 by anywhere between 30 and 170 million. And depending on how much you're cutting, it really has an impact on what we're building and what we're able to accomplish on the program. Go ahead and open it up, Paul. So the program and the leadership, when I say leadership, it was both the management committee, of which Tom Hickmann is one of the members, and the WWSS board had to balance what we were offering in terms of potential cuts with the mission of the WWSP and the financial realities of the funding agencies. Next slide, Paul, or next click. And so what ultimately was selected is a cut of $50 million from the program, which is substantial and means substantial changes to what we're actually going to be building. So the rest of it, Paul, please. And so one of the things that we're, as I mentioned, the program or the system includes 2 reservoirs on top of Cooper Mountain. We're only going to move forward with one of them. One of them will be adequate for the near term and for our initial operations. And so we'll build deferring the second one for the future. PLW2, as mentioned here, is our pipeline segment in Cornelius Pass Road from Francis up to Sunset Highway. We're going to be deferring most of that. It is an important part of the Willamette Water Supply system, but it's not necessary for initial operations. As demands increase and future build-out occurs, there will be a necessary element of the program to finish, but it will be done in the future. And then there were some other minor deferrals or smaller cut deferrals, including a fiber optic system, some treatment plant components, and staff positions. All told, there a $50 million cut in the program, which is going to help keep us on track and help address the financial realities due to COVID that everyone has experienced. That concludes my part of the presentation. I'll pass it now to Paul Matthews. Paul?
Well, thank you, Dave. And I want to thank everybody who's taken time this evening to join us for open house. We understand that y'all have busy lives, and just thankful that you're able to join us and learn about these matters. It's greatly appreciated. As you've heard, I'm Paul Matthews. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the district, and it's my job, my responsibility to match the financial capacity of the district to the needs that Dave and Tom have just described. So let me get into the details here as we go forward. There we go. The district operates within what we describe as our financial management process. There are really 3 major phases to this. The first is the financial planning phase. And with that, we develop financial strategies where we work closely with the board and the staff to develop approaches that will meet the district's long-term financial needs. The financial plan looks out 30 years, and it looks at future capital improvements. It looks at the effects of debt and other matters to plan the district's financial future. Once we have a financial plan approved, and we did that in May of this year, then we work towards the budget itself. We work with the budget committee, which includes our 5 members of the Board of Commission, as well as 5 citizen members of the budget committee. We work to get an adopted budget. We're on a biennial basis, which means that our budget runs from July 1st of 2021 through June 30 of 2023. And that budget is a 2-year spending plan that the district uses during that 2-year period. But again, it's consistent with the financial plan. And the third phase is the rates, and that's what we're talking about tonight. What are the rates that are necessary to meet the needs of the financial plan and the budget? And then the last item is delivering, and that's what the district does in delivering the construction projects that Dave talked about, as well as operating the system, providing the water to our customers on a daily basis. I want to talk about the district's financial performance in the last 2 years as a prelude to talking about the impact and the needs for the rates that we have right now. What I'm presenting here is the cumulative operating expenditures over the past 2 years. The dotted line at the top is the budget. The solid blue line at the bottom is the actuals. Now, we have probably invoices that are still going to be coming to the district that will be scored against last year's budget. So these numbers may change a little bit as our vendors provide those final invoices. But as the pandemic kicked off, the CEO gave us direction to preserve as much financial flexibility as we could, and we've done everything we can to do that by managing our operating expenditures. And by the time it's all said and done, we expect to have well over $10 million of savings in operating expenditures. On the capital side, we also see our capital expenditure coming under budget as well. So again, the dotted line is the budget, and the solid line are the actuals. And this has preserved some of the cash flow for the district as we move forward with the continued capital projects. On the not so good side of it is water sales revenue. So the dotted line was the budget, what we expected. Solid blue line is what we actually realized. Now this, just like the operating expenditures, will change as we read meters and we actually score some of that revenue into the prior fiscal year. But we're expecting that we'll be $10 to $12 million behind on the on water sales revenue, and that's had a significant impact on our financial strategy as well. A bit of good news, system development charges have been above plan. Now, system development charges are growth-related costs. They're implemented following Oregon law that allows new customers, or requires new customers to pay for, offset the cost of growth that they would otherwise have on the district. So the idea behind system development charges is to make it fair that new customers pay their fair share and that water rates don't go up to support growth. We had strong performance early on in the biennium, slowed down during the pandemic, and it's been somewhat spotty since then. But system development charge revenue has been a good news story for us. So where do we end up in the end for 2019-21 biennium? Revenues, COVID-19 negatively affected our water sales revenue. And as I said, the jury's still out, but somewhere between $10 to $12 million is what we're expecting. System development charges, they exceeded plan. That helped offset that. On the expenditure side, management focused on savings. Again, to provide that financial flexibility during COVID-19, we were successful in doing that. Our operating expenditures are below budget. We had higher than anticipated bad debt expense, though, and that offset some of that. But even with those higher than expected bad debt expense, and that's expense that we have to take from an accounting perspective to account for the fact that not all of our customers are paying their bills in a timely manner. Even with that, we still had our operating expenditures come in below budget. And as I mentioned, capital expenditures are below budget. This means that from a cash flow perspective, we ended the biennium with more cash, with higher fund balances than we had expected. In addition to that, we've got over $68 million in cash that's accessible to us through our WIFIA loan. So the WIFIA loan is a low interest loan that we got from the EPA, about $388 million loan at a 1.35% interest rate that allows us to draw money as needed. So we can draw up to $68 million. We won't do that until needed just to save money. So conclusions on 2019-21 biennium, COVID-19 did reduce our revenue. It affected the district's financial performance as well as our debt strategy going forward. The savings that we've had have offset near-term losses in revenue despite increases in the bad debt expense that I described, and the district's cash position remains strong. So I want to now pivot over and talk about the financial plan and the rates that we are proposing. You saw this graphic in Mr. Hickmann's presentation, and this is the district's planned capital expenditures by fiscal year for the next decade. And as you can see, we peak in 2023 as we build out the bulk of the construction projects in the Willamette Water Supply Program. The gray area is the in-district CIP, which is building infrastructure that is going to deliver the Willamette Water Supply Program throughout the district service area, as well as replace some of our critical infrastructure that has reached the end of its life. The blue area is the program that Mr. Kraska described. As you can see, we're planning to spend on the program about $510 million total over that 10-year period. And we have about $400 million of in-district CIP projects, that's capital improvement projects that we anticipate as well. We will use long-term debt. I mentioned the WIFIA loan as part of that strategy. We will use long-term debt to help us do two things. First, keep our water rates as affordable as possible. And secondly, to spread out the repayment over time so that future users who will benefit from these capital projects will help fund them. Most of these capital projects, their lives are many decades long, some of them over 100 years in length. So we want to use long-term debt to do that. The $388 million WIFIA loan that we talked about is part of that. And right now we're anticipating another $36 million in what we describe as traditional revenue bonds, the traditional way that we would fund capital improvements in addition to that. You can see that after 2025, though, we're anticipating that we'll have sufficient cash flow that we will not need additional borrowing, and we'll just be repaying that debt over time. I do want to mention that the $36 million in bonds is very volatile, and there are a lot of things that can influence that. Right now it's at 36 million, but that can go up or down based on the timing of borrowing and some other factors such as interest rates, etc. This forecast has risks just like any forecast does, and some of them are highlighted here. The first one we highlight is our cost of purchased water from the city of Portland. A big part of our cost structure right now is paying for that water from the city of Portland, so change in their cost would then be reflected in the cost to us. Interest rates are also an important part because we are involved in a very capital intensive business here in the water utility, so we will be borrowing money. Interest rates, either because of the general increase in interest rates or loss of tax exempt status on our debt or change in our credit rating, could affect our long-term borrowing costs. The district does have a AA+ credit rating, and that is the credit rating that we're targeting. It's the sweet spot for us where we get the best bang for our buck in terms of our cost of borrowing. The other risk would be capital expenditures. Tom Hickmann talked about the increases in the rate of inflation that we've seen recently, and we've got a lot of stuff to buy over the next 5 or 6 years. So inflation will be an important, will have an important impact on our overall financial plan. Those are very important, and we'll monitor that very closely. And there are other impacts as well. 2 years ago, when we presented the risk of the forecast, we talked about the potential for an economic downturn, changes in water demand. We didn't think that'd be related to COVID-19, but boy, it did happen. And those are the kinds of things that we will watch and track as we go into the future. So taken all together, with our financial strategy, we do have a proposal to adjust our water rates. We have both a volume charge and a fixed charge. I'm going to start with the volume charge first. So the volume charge is based on the amount of metered water use that a customer has, and we have 2 blocks, a block 1 and a block 2. The block 2 is meant to capture those peak related demands that people have, and it costs us more to deliver that water in the peak period. Hence our rates are structured in such a way to achieve that cost of service where people are charged in proportion to the cost they impose on the system. So the 2-block structure, the first block is going from $5.62 to $6.15 by November 1st, 2021, and then a proposed $6.73 by November 1st, 2022. The block 2 is going from just north of $8 to $8.77 November 1st of 2021, and $9.60 by November of 2022. It's important, the threshold that we have is based on the amount of water. The block 1 for residential customers is up to 14 CCF per month, or 28 over a 2-month period. And all consumption over that 28 for single family residential is billed at the higher block 2 rate. For all the other customer classes, it's 140% of their 12-month moving average. That's at block 1. Anything above that is at the block 2 rate. As I mentioned, in addition to the volume charges, we have our fixed charges, and they vary based on the size of the meter. The fixed charges recover the cost of reading meters, maintaining the meters and services, as well as fire protection cost. We provide fire protection throughout the district service area, and whether you take water or not, we still have the cost of providing that fire protection. So we are proposing increases in the fixed monthly charges that are presented here in this table as well. We look at the impacts on customers. We start with the typical customer, and our typical customer uses 700 cubic feet per month, which is just about 5,000 gallons of water in a monthly period. This shows graphically the increase in November 21 and November 22 for both the fixed and the volume charge. We have in tabular form showing the same information, and as you can see in this table, the monthly increase would be $5.32 in November for bills issued after November of 2021, and $5.83 after November of 2022. The postcard that we sent out had a typographical error in it. Rather than the 583, it had the numbers reversed. It said 538, and apologize for any confusion that may have caused, but the typical bill is estimated to increase by that 583 in the second month. Some of our customers use more than the typical. For an above average customer, we show the information here. It's about an $8 a month increase in November of 2021 and about $8.75 increase in November of 2022. And then finally, we look at a customer that has very high use. And this is somebody that has almost 21,000 gallons of water in a monthly period. And that's over 87 tons of water that we deliver. It would go up by $19.67 for those bills after November 2021 and $21.51 after November of 2022. So these are customers with quite a bit of water, very few bills at that level, primarily in the summer month. So with that, that's the impact on our customers. I'm going to turn it back over to Tom Hickmann to give us some closing remarks.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Dave. Thank you for muting. I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. I do appreciate you taking the time to learn more about why our rates are going up and what's driving those. I want to remind all of our customers that while nobody enjoys increased rates or an increased bill, this is a remarkable resource that's delivered to you at a price of 1.2 cents per gallon, which is truly remarkable. And that is not something we take for granted or take lightly. That is something we take very seriously to try to keep our costs low and keep those prices down, but at the same time making sure that we've provided for the reliability and the sustainability of our water supply, that we keep you in water, and also all the businesses and companies that employ people in this region. This water supply is critical to them as well. So this is a big investment for our community, for our region, and I appreciate the participation and the hard work that needs to be done to make that happen. So with that, I think we are going to allow some questions here, and you can type them in, and I will turn it over to Andrea.
Thanks, Tom. Next slide, please. And for those of you that did join after we gave our little intro about how the technology works, you type your questions into the little thought bubble that has a question mark on it, and we will assign someone to answer that for you as we wrap up the presentations here. Next slide, Paul, can you just enter, oops, back one? I don't know, it didn't load correctly. Interesting. Okay, well, I'm going to wing it here. We do have additional opportunities for you to participate in this rate setting process. This is session 2 of the information portion. We will offer this session one more time, same presentations with it following a Q&A, and that'll be on Saturday, August 21st, and from 9:30 to 11 a.m. There's also an open comment period where you can submit your comments to the board by email or online, or you can mail them to our headquarters office. The opportunity to do that will close on August 25th at 4 p.m. And we have information about that on our website, tvwd.org, and we put that information in the chat as well. For those of you that are joining on the phone or in a manner that does not allow you to see the slides, we will post the slides as well as this video for playback as soon as that's available, and we would estimate that to be in the morning. Then the last opportunity to participate, you can testify at the public hearing. That will be virtual using a similar format to this on Wednesday, August 18th. And then at that point, there's a week left to submit comments. And then we bundle those all up regardless of how we got them. We take them from all sources and we send those to each of our Board of Commissioners so they have a time to read them all and give some thoughtful review before they adopt rates on Wednesday, September 15th at the regular business meeting in September. So with that, next slide, we're going to open it up and let you have a chance here. And I'm going to turn it over to Justin Dyke from Communications to field any questions that came in during the presentations.
Thanks so much, Andrea. As of right now, we have one question, and it will be for our CFO, Paul Matthews, to answer. The question comes from Chuck W., who writes, why are the volume rates in cities like Beaverton or Hillsborough so much less than the water district? For example, the Beaverton volume rate is only 75% of the district's. It would be helpful if the presentation materials included slides explaining how and why rates vary so much. With that, Paul, you can take over and answer this question from Chuck.
You bet. I'll do the best I can here. So the difference really comes down to cost structure. So we have been buying our water from the city of Portland, the bulk of our water from the city of Portland. That costs more, and we're replacing that supply with the Willamette Water Supply Program that we just described. So there's a greater reliance on that new water supply, and the way that those are financed also will affect it. One other point, which is that the district engages in a long-term financial plan, which allows us to look out over a long period of time. And I think that it's fair to say that we will see increases in our neighbors' water rates as the cost, their investment in their water supply systems increase as well over time. It wasn't that long ago that TVWD's rates were actually lower than the city of Beaverton's, and that has an effect. As it relates to the city of Hillsborough, they have a very large customer in Intel, which provides some economies of scale to them. We also serve Intel, but it's a smaller percentage of our overall revenue structure. All those factors affect the difference in water rates among the jurisdictions that you're mentioning.
Thanks so much, Paul. And as of right now, that's the only question we have. So one additional reminder to everyone who's attending tonight, thanks so much for your time this evening. But if you have any questions, now would be a great time to write them in the chat box. We'll wait a couple more seconds here. And if I don't see any questions popping up, I will transition this back over to our CEO, Tom Hickmann. So one last call for questions in the chat. Not seeing any more, so I will turn this back over to Tom to wrap up the evening. Thanks again so much, everyone.
And I would also like to thank you again and appreciate your attending. The one thing I'd like to ask is that if you leave here and you've given some thought to what we've said here tonight and you're thinking, you know, I do have a question. One, you can join the next virtual session that is on Saturday morning, August 21st. You could also send a comment in through our website that was announced earlier, and you could let us know and let the board know that way what your comment is. But we'd be happy to respond to anything after you've had time to think about this and something comes to mind. So at that, we'll close, and thank you very much.
Actually, Tom, can I just add one thing, because I think we had one slide that was disabled. So we are, the board is going to hold a public hearing next week, and that public hearing will be on the 18th. If you'd like to make a public comment and get it in the public record, there are multiple ways to do that, and I think I'll let Andrea highlight what those are. But we would like to get those in the public record so the board can consider its action, which it will be taking, again, the public hearing on the 18th of August, and the action then would be on September 15th. So we'll be able to take public comment until 4 p.m. on the 25th, I believe, Andrea, but I'll turn it back over to you to clarify that.
Sure, Paul. Everything you said was completely accurate. You can find that comment form that's available online at tvwd.org. And you can also email us at board@tvwd.org, or you can send a letter in the mail, and we will accept those comments through August 25th at 4 p.m. The virtual meeting using the similar platform for the public hearing is on August 18th at 6 p.m. And on our website and the postcard we mailed you, we have phone number and contact information if you want to participate in that. And if you know you do want to participate in that, you can just put something in the Q&A. We won't share your contact information, but we would reach back out to you. And then again, the decision after the board has considered all that input that's received would happen on September 15th. So again, thank you for your time this evening, and we welcome your participation in this process.